Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, Genoveva. It's wonderful to be here. And one of the things I'm going to explain today is how does gratitude bring about healing? It's fine to observe it, but do we understand how that happens? So in my lecture today, we'll be looking at all of that, and hopefully you'll come away with a deeper understanding of exactly how homeopathy works its miracles. And that'll help us use homeopathy better as well. Okay, so I share my screen. I can share my PowerPoint here. Oops, sorry. Let me just. Okay, can you see my slideshow? Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to look at the complex and magical process of homeopathy, as you call it. The why awakening, healing, and science and everything and homeopathy all must begin from within. Okay, so um, let's look at the latest scientific research and what it tells us. So first, let's ground in what this conference is about, which is what is the true self, right? So what do we mean by the self? What do you consider your true self? So let's just take a moment to sink into the question, is it something you are or something you think about? As you think of the question, without giving an answer, because it's a question more that you drop into yourself. And as you drop it into yourself, bring your awareness into yourself as well, down into your belly, down into the lower Tantien, where you can become aware of the first impulse of the breath as it moves through your body, where you can sink in and allow your energy to sink in to the deepest part of you, to your resource, to your source. And just allow yourself to feel how you're being breathed in every moment. The true self is that inner experience. This slide that I'm about to show you holds the whole presentation. So if there's something that's not clear to you on it, don't worry, because we're going to come back to it over and over again. At the top is what I'm calling the true self. The self is that inner experience that we just had, as subject, as knowing. On the side is the false self, the narrative self, what we call the story, the memory, the belief, the interpretation, reactions. Those are all neurologically implemented through the default mode network in the brain. And at the bottom of this slide is what medicine usually focuses on, which is disease, symptoms, diagnoses. So for now, looking at this process, the process that we're going to be looking at of how experience becomes physiology, of course, we're going to need to talk about the interface. Right? What is that mind-body interface? How do thoughts become physiology? That's an important part of what we're going to be doing today. So that translation between levels, okay, for the mental to be able to cause chronic diseases is the key point. Okay, so now let's look at the false self. This is the self that we create actually through conditioning and through our belief of ourselves as something separate. And as a concept, it's the self that you look at when you look at yourself in the mirror. It's seeing yourself as an object, as a concept, the me. This self is shaped by beliefs, opinions, culture, and it's maintained by interpretation because we begin interpreting the world according to this self, according to those beliefs and opinions. And this is what's experienced as me, mine. And that experience is sustained by a habitual self-referential processing. And this is what neuroscience refers to as the pattern, the memory-based pattern that is created by the default mode network. The DMN constructs a model of me, a model of the self, by integrating memory, selective memory, right, and self-referential thought. So every time you think about me, you know, am I this, am I that? What did they think of me? How should I present myself? All of that self-focus is what's called self-referential processing, and it takes up a lot of the energy of the brain. As a matter of fact, it takes up more energy than any other brain function. And because the brain already takes up more energy than any other organ in the body, thinking about yourself is the most expensive energetic activity that you can do. It costs your body a lot. So, you know, to understand the functioning of the DMN and exactly how prevalent it is, and how it's developed and how it has become in our society of social media and with all the focus on the self, that it's become quite an extended network that connects 44 parts of the brain to maintain this self-concept. Now, the problem arises when the model, the concept, the idea of me, and you should know from your experience that your idea of yourself changes all the time. One day you can love yourself and the next day you hate yourself. One day you think you're great and the next day you don't think you're so good. You know, all of that, why it changes so quickly and so easily is because it's a concept. It's a model. And when we mistake the model for who we actually are is the problem. So what matters clinically for us is not the default mode network itself, but it's the lived experience that it supports, the experience of the separate self. And that lived experience is what Einstein called the illusion of separateness, a kind of optical delusion, as he calls it, the greatest tragedy of human existence. The true self, the self as experience, is the experiential self. We are a happening. We're an experience. We're an event. We're not a thing. That inner experience helps us connect to ourselves as events, as something happening, as a process. We are a process that can be known from the inside, before concepts and ideas and labels. The real self, the true self, is dynamic, it's alive, and it's never fixed. It's in coherence with the whole. And this is the key thing, is that the concept of self, whatever ideas you have of yourself, is a concept. It's not alive. It's not dynamic. It's not being sustained by the whole. And even worse, being self-focused means that you are limiting your ability to be moved by the whole. You're limiting your organism's access to the whole, the hologram, to the whole as our source, as the source of life. So the self, the true self, is a subjective experience, the I am, a process and the experience of knowing. So because I'm using the word know, I want to make something clear. Knowing is not information. Knowing is a process. Information is the result of that process. Okay, it's the thing. Knowing is the process. Information comes from knowing, but knowing can't come from information. So this is key for us clinically. We don't need information about our patient. What we need and want is their inner experience. Why? Because it is the only way to know what they need. And it is the only true science. Science meant knowing. It's not measurement alone. It's not just data or information. It's an understanding that can only come from experiencing from within, an inner, not outer experience. And the moment we confuse experience with description, knowing with knowing with information, the true self disappears behind that information. And this is how science actually advances. And this is how healing happens. And this is how all of our insights come. Newton derived his understanding of mechanics, the movement of physical objects, by personifying, imagining the inner experience of the object. When he says, when you read what Newton wrote, he says very clearly what the object experiences when a force acts upon it. He uses words such as difficulty, persevere, strive, and endeavor. He was tapped into the inner experience of matter. Einstein, in order to come up with his incredible and beautiful explanation of energy, matter, and light, did that through becoming a photon, through the inner experience of the photon. He asked himself what it would be to be a photon, reflected off the train station's clock, right? David Bohm, another great quantum physicist, imagined himself as a gyroscope in order to be the first person to explain how a gyroscope works. Every scientist who has made a pivotal, revolutionary revelation about the natural world, any scientist who has contributed true knowledge, understanding, and not information, has done so through insights that have come through an inner experience, not from external observation alone, but instead using the outer observation to enter into the inner experience. This is so important for us as humans to understand. When we can even ask the question, can AI replace human intelligence? It shows how disconnected we are. AI is information. Only humans can have new insights. Only humans can experience nature and understand nature through experience. So experience is fundamental. And one thing to understand, and one thing that we need to understand, I think, as homeopaths, is that subjective experience is a central property of matter. It's actually the inner nature of matter. Matter exists as the result of consciousness. The material paradigm is over. That ended with quantum physics. Matter does not come from matter. Matter comes from consciousness. And consciousness does not come from matter. Consciousness predates matter. Then the consciousness reemerges through matter, but originally is consciousness. And how matter is created, how everything in space-time, everything that we call the universe is created, is the result of consciousness experiencing itself from a unique perspective. Physical matter is the outer form taken by consciousness to symbolically represent an experience of itself. Each time consciousness, universal consciousness, big C consciousness, experiences itself from a new perspective, a new whole is created. And throughout nature, experience occurs whenever energy is transferred in or out of matter. In other words, whenever new wholes are created. As an example is hydrogen and oxygen. When hydrogen and oxygen enter into an experience together, when energy is transferred between them and they form water, water is not as the properties of matter of water are totally different than hydrogen or oxygen. Water is a liquid at room temperature. It freezes. It has all sorts of other properties. Its polarity and everything else. It's electromagnetic, everything else. The inner experience of H2O is totally different than hydrogen and oxygen, and as well as their outer form. So new wholes are created through energy transfer, but specifically through the emerge from consciousness experiencing itself. So each time oneness or experience itself from a new point of view within space-time, a new whole emerges. We used to believe that we live in a static and closed universe in which entropy or disorder is constantly increasing. This was old science. What we know is that the universe is expanding faster than light at its edges, expanding exponentially at the horizon. It's growing from within. There's no endpoint to the universe. And for those of you who know quantum physics, of course, you understand that the quantum field is the database of oneness experiencing itself. When we call the quantum field as the repository of all possibilities of manifestation, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about all of the experiences of the oneness experiencing itself, which is continuing to happen. So this repositions evolution as the awakening of experience. The process of evolution from the first atom to the most complex living being is a process of the inner, non-conscious experience becoming conscious. This process itself becomes a conscious act in the human being. The purpose informing evolution. Why did evolution happen? It's evolution is not survival of the fittest and all of that stuff. If that were true, then the viruses, were it. Viruses will outlive us. They survive everything. So it's not about survival of the fittest. It's evolution and the growing of complexity of form and the creation of the human being is from the movement of holism, the movement of consciousness to discover and reveal the meaning of the natural world. Reveal the meaning of the natural world by knowing the inner experience of everything that exists. Consciously reflecting back to consciousness the inner experience of everything that is created and maintained in existence by consciousness. So we can say that the purpose and meaning of life, why humans exist, is to know the world from within. Because we are the product of the entire universe. We have the whole history and evolution from the first atom to the most complex being in us, in our organism. So to know the world from within, to reveal meaning, to bring inner experience to consciousness is what the purpose of life is. And this isn't just a metaphor, it's a function. It's our purpose. It's why we live. In humans, knowing the experience of consciousness, becoming aware of itself. And this is the consciousness of creation, of holism, being reflected by the experience of consciousness that comes through matter, the small c, the big C being experienced by the small c embedded in matter. That's the c squared. I like to think of that as the c squared of E equals mc squared. So homeopathic remedies. This is what makes being a homeopath so meaningful, is that we are bringing that inner invisible experience to the light of consciousness. That's what homeopathic provings are. It's knowing from the inside. We take everything in nature and experience it from the inside through the dynamization and potentization and proving. A proving reveals the inner experience. One experience of the whole. Every thing that exists is one experience of the whole, experiencing itself. Invisible, subjective, dynamic, and living. That is the self. Let's look at the homeopathic proving of hydrogen, just to sink into that. The proving of hydrogen reveals the experience of a new whole emerging within a oneness, doesn't it? It's the experience that consciousness has of itself as it brings a new whole into existence. It's funny because the word existence actually means exiting. What are we exiting? It's as if we are leaving the whole, as if we are exiting the whole to exist. And this is the most fundamental existential issue. So for the human being, so this is how we bring, this is the inner experience of hydrogen. And for the human being, this experience resonates, of course, with the challenge of incarnation. The spiritual nature of the human being feeling connected to the divine, and yet incarnation feels like it's a separation from the whole. But we remain with the desire, of course, to return to it. And why, in what case would we use hydrogen to treat someone? It would be in someone who is suffering, because we only treat suffering, who is suffering too intensely from this inner conflict between unity and separation. Okay, between having the desire to return to that oneness and rejecting being incarnated. A state that is creating unhealthy, unwhole symptoms and disease directly related to that false self experience. So if inner experience is real, and it really is consciousness that informs life, then there must be a biological interface, as we said previously. That interface is the mitochondria, in the form of the mitochondrial information processing network, MIPS. Mitochondria are not just energy producers. They are quantum biological processors that translate informational input consciousness into physiology. That is where knowing becomes biology. Consciousness becomes biology. That narrative self, that false self in the DMN, doesn't stay in the mind. Through the mitochondria, through thought, it becomes biology. So we need to understand that, we need to understand the mitochondria just a little bit more. The mitochondria are in every single cell and around the nucleus of every single cell. They form synapses as they process information coming both from inside the cell, outside the cell, and outside the organism. And of course, in the brain and thought and consciousness. The mitochondria process all of these states, all of this information coming from the entire body-mind organism and its environment. It makes decisions from that input and then mediates from that input, makes decisions and mediates all the epigenetic changes that happen in the nucleus of the cell. So the turning on of oncogenes, causing of cancer, genes related to diabetes, any chronic disease, anything that we say is genetic, isn't just genetic. It's genetic because the mitochondria turned it on. The mitochondria are also responsible for evolution and adaptation, which is why they respond to stress and why they turn on our stress hormones. They're also involved in the fabrication, the actual manufacture of all of our hormones. They also produce cytokines, cortisone, and mitigate all of our inflammatory processes. This is where it happens. Mitochondria are living, dynamic, energy transforming, signaling, quantum processing organelles that actively transduce biological information. How our mental states get translated into physical symptoms and pain is through the mitochondria. They are the link between the mind and the body. And not that the mind or body is anyway separate. Okay. They're both the same singular energy movement. And this is what we have to understand, is that mind and body are one energy movement. The singular energy movement of the vital force, mediated and configured by the mitochondrial network. So the mitochondrial network are basically the physical infrastructure of the vital force. So when we say that the homeopathic remedy acts on the vital force, it's because it's acting on the mitochondria. And scientific research today, of course, shows the direct connection between mitochondrial processes and human experience. Circulating cell-free mitochondrial DNA, what's called CF-empty DNA, is currently being used as the key biomarker of psychobiological and cellular stress, anxiety states, affect, aging, cardiovascular disorders, and every other physical and mental state can be read through the mitochondria. Understanding the mitochondria is key to understanding the energetic dimension of life, because they are the energetic dimension of life. There are two quantum organelles, two quantum processes that are the basis of life. The one that happens in chloroplasts, you can think of as the cousins of the mitochondria. The chloroplasts in plants create all of the food. Every single morsel of food on the planet is created by a chloroplast, transforming energy into matter. That is a quantum process. And if you understand quantum physics, quantum processes don't happen in space-time. They happen in what's called Hilbert space. This is outside of space-time. This is where consciousness does its magic. And this is where these organelles do their magic. So the transformation of energy into matter happens in quantum space, Hilbert space, quantum, in that quantum dimension, in the quantum field, where the whole potential of possibilities are held. And they produce the food, the chloroplasts produce the food, and the mitochondria, and by capturing the energy into matter, and the mitochondria transform that matter into energy. So every bit of energy that is used that animates your body, what makes you alive, is the energy that goes through the mitochondria, that is processed through the mitochondria. And to do so, they need oxygen, which is why you breathe. You breathe to feed your mitochondria. The mitochondria bring the quantum potential of consciousness to living being. That is the prana of life. So together, all of the mitochondria in every cell form a bigger network. They intercommunicate between each other. It's an intelligent, energetic network throughout your body. That's the MIPS. Okay, that's what I refer to as the mitochondrial information processing system. That's the real interface. So yes, there's the individual mitochondria that we can see in the cells, but what we don't see, but is there, is the invisible energetic structure that maintains the whole processing system as a whole, which configures and maintains the vital field. And mitochondria can be tuned with homeopathy, because homeopathy is on the same immaterial, energetic dimension as the mitochondria. And that is what it's designed to address. Okay, so back to our schematic now, all right? Now we know that how inner experience can be translated into what the interface is, right? That can translate the inner experience into physiology. That's how it happens. It's through the mitochondria. And we mentioned that the narrative self doesn't stay in the mind. So now let's take a moment to see exactly how our thoughts become biology. So before we do that, you need to know two more things. You have to understand the process of disease: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Disease on any dimension can be caused or maintained through interference by the brain. And the brain is a receptor, huh? It's a transducer of consciousness, what I call small c consciousness. But the brain also holds our default mode network, a network created on the concept of self as an isolated, separate entity called me. The delusion, as Einstein called it, produced by seeing ourselves as our body, as a separate body, and then go and imagining that this is who we are. So just as, and the other thing that you need to understand, the second point, sorry, is that just as everything exists as a symbol of the experience of big C consciousness experiencing itself, that's all of matter, of course, is consciousness experiencing itself. Every hormone, body part, organ is a symbol of an experience of consciousness as well. So sensations and experiences in the body correlate to experiences in consciousness. And the body as symbol, right? So every single part, every vertebrae, every organ, every limb is a symbol of something in consciousness. So when our default mode network perceives threat, and that's threat to myself, somebody insults me or doesn't think I'm smart or doesn't think I'm attractive, or I start judging myself. So judge, worry, all of those things that are focused on the self are perceived as a threat to the concept of self. And unfortunately, because the DMN is in contact with every other part of the brain, it perceives this threat as a real threat, as if your physical body is being threatened. So when you feel yourself as a separate self, when you hold a concept of yourself, when you have ideas of yourself as who you are, when those ideas are challenged, your body reacts as if it's a physical threat. And because it perceives it as a physical threat coming from the outside, it sends that interpretation to the mitochondria. And of course, the mitochondria respond faithfully and say, oh my goodness, if you're being threatened, then we better go into defense. And that's when the mitochondria sends signals to a specific part of the body that represents what we feel needs defending. So shoulders, shoulders, what I should be doing, responsibility. Somebody calls me irresponsible, and then I start getting pain in my shoulders or tightness in my shoulder. Because I've defined myself as responsible, and someone calls me irresponsible. So the mitochondria will send signals to constrict and cause tension to the body part that represents what needs defending. That means that there's less blood, less oxygen. If there's less oxygen, then the mitochondria can't produce energy, and the energy flow is blocked. And that is the resistance in the electron flow in mitochondria, what we call energy blockages in the body. If on top of that we have anxiety and worry about the pain that we're receiving, or we continue to amplify the so-called injury that my concept of self received, right? That causes a feedback loop. And that causes the mitochondria to release mitochondrial DNA into the bloodstream. And that turns into an overreactive immune response. This is allergies, inflammation, and all chronic disease is in any part, in any organ, in any function, is due to this feedback loop. Acute disease doesn't play a role. It's when there is chronic disease. Chronic disease is maintained by what goes on in our brain. So, and that's what prevents that organ from healing itself, from, again, the energy that animates us from being able to heal itself, because everything in our body is able to heal itself. So the feedback loop can easily be retriggered, and every time it's retriggered or thought about in different ways or focused on, then that maintains the disease. What we have to come away with, and what I hope you come away with in this understanding, is that disease is not a failure of the body. Disease is not a failure of the system. It's an intelligent response to distorted information. That's what chronic disease is. When the organism is informed directly by the whole, when we are in our true self, rather than our past narrative, the past, the concept of self aren't real. Concept is just a concept. It's not a real thing. So the narrative self, your memories, your beliefs, your interpretations, your opinions, all of that stuff isn't real, isn't in reality. It's in your head. So when that is coming in, of course, that's going to disturb the coherence that is naturally there when the natural true self, the natural true inner experience and knowing of the self from the inside in coherence with the whole is being translated through the mitochondria and into our physiology. So health is maintained through that flow of the true self, of the inner experience, of our coherence, flowing into the mitochondria and into our physiology. And that's why meditation happens and has such a great impact, or being grateful has such a big impact, because we're going into the inner experience, the knowing that we have so much to be grateful for, that life is a miracle. And in that knowing, we come into coherence. That message is then sent into the mitochondria. And then the mitochondria can do what they do so well, which is organize the vital force and organize the whole system. And this is where homeopathy works. At the level of this input, it allows the mitochondria to release the defense and say, no, 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 that's not what's really happening. Health isn't something we add. It's what emerges when the true self is allowed to express itself, and it's not covered over by all of our inner chatter, our endless thinking and thoughts. So I've gone through through a lot and a lot of different concepts very, very quickly because I only had this amount of time. But if you'd like some more in-depth explanations of everything that I've been speaking about today, the quantum field, quantum organelles, understanding mitochondria, it's all on our website. So you can definitely go to our website. It's access this free e-training, recorded presentations of all of these topics as well as other things. And if you want to sign up in our newsletter, you can stay abreast of the latest research that I'm always bringing forward, and methodology and holistic homeopathic practice as well, are the whole niche method. And of course, if you want to know more about our method, then don't hesitate to contact us, and we'll be happy to provide training and information for you on that. For the time being, so I'd like to thank you all. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation. Really appreciated this opportunity to share this research with you. And I want you to stay tuned because next is Christiane McGee. She works with me. She's my colleague. She's a niche clinical supervisor and a key teacher. And she's going to be presenting the most important practical tool for evaluating the impact of the false self and thinking of the self on health that we use in the niche method, and that you can use and apply in your practice or life right away. So thank you again, everyone, for joining me. Good. Yeah. Yes, I can. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, first of all, there are many different types of mitochondria in every organ. And where the mitochondria probably are the most populous is in the heart. Uh, yeah, and then in the brain and then the liver and the other organs. So yeah, it's in the heart because, and of course we know why in the heart, because that is where our central energetic field. Well, our field, our direct contact with the quantum field is through the heart, through the quantum field produced in the heart by the mitochondria. So that's where they sit, because and that's why the meditations through the heart are so important as well. Yeah. Yeah. Mine as well. Mine. Thank you for inviting me. Okay, great. So